Morning. So welcome everyone to this morning's session. Great to see you all here to launch the Global 500 2026 from Brand Finance. So that's our annual study of the world's most valuable and strongest brands. And we're also looking forward to a great panel session on the evolution of brand and trust in a world of AI. So thanks all very much for being here. Just a little bit about Brand Finance before we start. Our mission is bridging the gap between marketing and finance. So we actually, it's our 30th anniversary this year, so there'll be more on that later in the year, so various celebrations around April. But we were founded in 1996 by our founder David Haig with a mission to bridge the gap between marketing and finance. And back then, I think that was about demonstrating that brands were business assets, that they had a tangible monetary value. And I think, fast forward 30 years on, I think the mission remains very relevant, even though the world has obviously changed dramatically with the whole digital marketing revolution, with the rise of so-called performance marketing. I think the mission to sort of celebrate and champion brand building is kind of as relevant as ever. For those of you who don't know Brand Finance, we're in the business of value-based brand management. What that means is we first of all measure brands, so value brands, and answer questions around what's the value of my brand, how strong is my brand relative to competition. We help to manage brands. So answering questions around strategy, positioning, architecture, for example, putting in brand governance frameworks and scorecards, and then ultimately maximizing brand value and looking at incremental revenue streams. How can we really leverage this brand, this business asset to either drive new revenue streams or grow with existing clients? We think the largest brand value database in the world. So we value over 5,000 brands every single year. The Global 500 is, the sort of the centerpiece in terms of the value of the most valuable brands in the world. But we also publish during the year a whole range of different studies, sector-specific studies, so brands can see how they're doing directly against their peers, as well as regional studies, country studies, and other sort of specific studies like looking at the value of nation brands, for example, which is another event going on in Davos later on today. And all of our valuations are underpinned by proprietary research, so it's all kind of underpinned by data. We every year we conduct a study called what we call the Global Brand Equity Monitor with the general public, covering over 150,000 respondents across many different sectors and brands. In the B2B space, we also conduct proprietary research in a few select industries like IT services, engineering services, mining, asset management, and a few others. So it's really important for us that the valuations that we conduct are really underpinned by that solid kind of data foundation. What we're really here to do, though, is to celebrate and to champion brands and branding and the impact that those strong brands can have on business results. So this year, the Global 500 has the value of the Global 500 has grown by 11%. So in total, it's worth $10.4 trillion. The value of those 500 brands. Those brands are, on average, worth 20% of their total enterprise value. So a fifth of the total value of those organizations is represented by their brands. So really sort of help reinforcing the point, brands are significant business assets. And that growth of 11% stands of the overall ranking stands against average economic growth of 3%. So we can sort of start to see strong brands helping to propel those businesses forward faster than the average. And more evidence on that comes from an ETF that we've set up with Legal & General. So this is their analysis, not our analysis. And you can, I think you can invest in this ETF. It is available to certain investors. And what the Legal & General analysis shows is that the top 100 brands in our study outperform the mega cap peers in the MSCI World Index on shareholder yield, on return on equity, and on operating margin, and they provide a significant advantage relative to their peers. That fund is kind of slowly but surely accumulating assets under management with this impressive outperformance. So how do those strong brands drive that kind of business performance? Well, strong brands create financial value in three ways. People can try and make valuation complicated at times, but at its core, it's very straightforward. They drive growth. Strong brands drive growth. They drive higher profit margin, and they create more reliable earnings and lower risk. And these are really the only three ways that you can create value. They're the three levers of value creation: of growth, profit, risk. And so we've built that into our brand strength framework. So we have a methodology around how we measure brand strength that's based on looking at brand perceptions and customer behaviors. We look at knowledge, credibility, and appeal. And then we look at selection, price acceptance, and advocacy. And each of these are linked back to those fundamental drivers of growth, profit, and risk in some way. But in order to be sort of effective as a management system, it's important that we look at brand strength as a diagnostic tool, but then we also look at other signals that are coming from the market, and really importantly, ensure that there's a clear action plan. I think too many brand evaluation systems don't end up with a very clear, tangible, cross-functional action plan within the business of what we're going to do next. So what's the so what from the evaluation? That brand strength framework is kind of a core component of the valuation methodology. The strength of the brand helps to determine the royalty rate that we attribute to the brand, which we then apply to forecasted revenues, and that's what generates the brand values that we're about to see. So, with that sort of preamble over to here are the results. So, this is the top 10 this year. Apple remains at the number one spot, exceeding $600 billion in value. Microsoft is closing the gap in second place, so faster growth from Microsoft, closing the gap against Apple. Who knows what would happen? Next year maybe there'll be some, an overtake there. We've got some clear winners from AI in the top 10. You've got obviously Microsoft at number 2. Nvidia's one of the fastest growing brands, probably no surprise to anybody in the study this year, with 110% growth. In 5th place. We've got 3 Asian brands kind of trying to defend against the dominance from the US. All but eight of those brands are tech. And in terms of overall kind of the part of the backdrop of this whole session is like the concentration of power and dominance of a small number of huge players. The total value of the top 10 brands in the study is 27% of the value of the entire Global 500. So we're seeing that kind of clearly seeing that sort of concentration of wealth and influence and power in a small number of huge dominant players. In terms of sector shifts, probably the things to highlight here is, obviously, semiconductors, I think, is obviously a big winner at the moment. In terms of the whole geopolitical landscape and the conflict and tension in the world at the moment, we're seeing a lot of growth in the defense sector. In terms of the declining sectors, I think that's sort of reflective of continued cost of living issues for consumers. So we're kind of seeing that all of the issues that we're seeing in the world around us that are being debated all across Davos, I suppose, are kind of being reflected in some of these sector shifts that we're seeing in our study. And so, brands are operating with a backdrop of growing complexity, uncertainty, and volatility. We're seeing forced migration, desertification. That's from increased use of cotton. We've also resource scarcity, the whole sort of issue around minerals, obviously, that we're all aware of. Climate change, conflict. This is fun, isn't it? Geopolitics, cost of living crisis, and then on top of all of that, we now have AI, and the disruption that AI is bringing, in terms of deep fake imagery, brain rot, which was a new one to me. So sort of AI is really sort of throwing into even more disruption and uncertainty and complexity into the mix that was already there. And so, as the world becomes more unpredictable, people are reporting, growing mistrust in institutions that are designed to manage it. So Edelman, I think, were launching their 26 barometer earlier today. Their 25 study had 60% of people feeling resentful, viewing of the institutions that are meant to serve them. In the OECD, and the OECD reports only 39% of people trust their national governments, down from 43% in 2021. And then the World Economic Forum report from 26 had misinformation and disinformation ranked as the second most severe risk globally, only with geo-economic confrontation being number one. So we're seeing this kind of issue unfold and people sort of not trusting the institutions around them. Interestingly, if you, again, taking the Edelman data but going back over a longer time frame, there is an opportunity for businesses and brands. We're seeing, where business is really seeing the biggest shift in terms of growing levels of trust from people. And so there's an opportunity there for businesses and brands, and we think that that opportunity is something that requires intentional management. And so we've created a kind of the brand finance trust model in order to help organizations to think about and manage trust in a more intentional way. It starts by looking at the types of trust. So we've got, we think there are 3 types of trust: functional, relational, and principled trust. You've got to be able to do the job. You've got the bedrock of all brands is trust in being able to deliver the product or service. Then relational, is this brand on my side? Principled, this is an organization that does the right thing. We think we need to think about the interpretation of those 3 pillars across geographical and temporal lenses. So trust means different things to different people. It depends on who your neighbours are. It depends on culture. So there's a variety of geographical factors, and things can obviously change over time and increasingly change quite rapidly over time. And then you've got to manage all that through the lens of your brand strategy. Think about how to activate that across different touch points, and then ensure that you're measuring that over time and managing it accordingly. Just a few brands from our database that exemplify some of those different areas of trust. In terms of functional trust, we think Google is a good example there. Almost 80% of respondents trust Google to meet their needs. They've been growing, and obviously a top 10 brand. Tesla, by contrast, 4 in 10 respondents have low trust in Tesla's ability to meet their needs now. We've seen Tesla kind of being affected in terms of brand value, reduced trust. Obviously, there's an Elon Musk element there, but also obviously disruption and competition from China. In terms of that relational trust, Revolut, an example from our database I thought I'd showcase. I think the fastest growing brand this year, with 239% growth. In terms of great customer service, there's been a significant jump in our global brand equity monitor data in terms of the average score, and we see that in addition to obtaining banking licenses is obviously a key element of building their functional trust. But Revolut is doing a great job of layering on top of that this sort of relational component and delivering excellent customer service. And then in terms of principal trust, I think Microsoft's a good example. I think if you're a huge tech giant like them, they're always going to you're never going to get everything right. But we see Microsoft consistently scoring well in our data on things like trust. We think they are at least out there trying to sort of set some standards around AI leadership and principles of AI development, and we see that they're obviously continuing to do incredibly well in our study in terms of growth. And lastly, again, looking at the data from our research, we looked at the drivers of consideration across a whole range of different sectors, and we looked at attributes within our study that related to either functional, relational, or principled forms of trust. And we can see that that trust, that in terms of those combined three elements, is driving a significant amount of consideration across sectors. So, I think the thesis for the panel is, as AI adoption accelerates and creates more disruption and a whole plethora of different genuine and fake content at exponential rates, we believe people are going to seek trusted brands more than ever. And so that is going to be the backdrop for our panel. If I could invite Jayesh from Infosys, Sam from KPMG, and Feroz from Syngenta to the stage, please. Okay. So thank you. Yeah, thank you all very much for coming and agreeing to join the panel for us. So my opening question is, we're living through a period of profound uncertainty, economic pressure, as we've just been sort of trying to set out there, climate anxiety, polarization, and now AI is kind of questioning the notion of what's real. In that context, do you believe AI is fundamentally a trust builder or a trust eroder for brands? Why is that the case, and how are you navigating this and using AI within your own organisations? Start with you.
Okay. So hi, everybody. Good morning. So if you were at Davos last year, you would have seen that we were running a You Can With AI campaign, which has been going for about 18 months. So slight spoiler alert there from me in terms of which side I'm going to come out on here. But basically, for me, with AI, trust is established in how it's designed, deployed, and governed. And you have to basically get all three of those right. And we know also there's a massive, strong correlation between trust and intent to purchase. So it goes all the way down the funnel as we start to look through. So, trust for me is kind of built when AI helps with consistency, with accuracy, when brands are transparent about its usage. It's eroded when it's overly automated, it's a little bit opaque. And it's not clear what the role of sort of human accountability or responsibility is in it. So those are the things that I would probably pull out. I think also some really, just 2 or 3 bits of interesting research to show that sort of trust deficit gap. So our CEO Outlook survey, which we did at the back end of last year, 90% of CEOs said their boards were ready to govern advanced AI, but only 60% of them said that 60% said they had issues with the ethical implications of it. And then we also do a big trust and attitudes survey, which we do with the University of Melbourne. And this is a massive sample size. It's 48,000 across 47 countries. The feedback from that was 83% see the benefits of AI, but less than 50% trust the systems. And then if I look a little bit closer to home and I look at marketing, and this is Gartner, not from me, but 63% marketers now use Gen AI regularly in their marketing, but we know only a third of consumers trust brands that rely on it heavily. So that's the sort of data that shows this gap, if you like, and this sort of trust and confidence issue that exists. So from a KPMG perspective, how are we managing it? Well, we sort of talk about our strategy being around being sort of bold, fast but responsible with AI, and we've sort of factored that into our systems. And so, if I look at AI, it's used across our business. We have agents across everything, our delivery platforms. So you can imagine in audit now, 100% of transactions now can be analysed. That leads to greater assurance. In tax, our digital gateway platform, it's got 2 million users. It's all AI enabled, and it's probably accountable for about 50% of our revenue now. And then in advisory, we have our Velocity, which is our business transformation platform. Again, so it's right across our business. One of the things we did, which was quite smart, was position ourselves as client zero up front. So we basically said to our clients, we will test everything on ourselves first. That, as a strategy, has stood us in good stead. We, of course, sell AI services and solutions to our clients. And a good example was our AI Workbench, which is a platform that we set up to build and manage agents, and so that we can scale agents responsibly across our business. So that's all underpinned. We have a trusted AI framework. I will not go through the details of that, but all I will say is it pretty much comes up first on organic search, so really pleased about that still. Don't look it up right now, but that's really good. And that covers off factors like explainability, human accountability, roles around that, data integrity, security, all of those things. We also have we're patented AR cards system, so every agent gets checked. It's documented, the usage of that agent and what the boundaries are around its usage. And also we set ourselves up for external scrutiny. So we are delighted to say ISO accredited, so what's it, 42001 for AI management systems. And so we have that as well. So that's how we are approaching it really at KPMG.
Right.
You touched upon earlier the brain rot. So as a father to, a teenager and a preteen, these things hit, I see it a lot more closely. And in fact, recently I heard a new term called AI slop. Mm-hmm. And even Instagram CEO said that, if AI slop continues to be so prevalent, Instagram will die, right? So I think it hits to the point of when AI is applied profusely, when it's applied without any governance, what you spoke about, Sam, it will lead to the erosion of trust. And therefore, this conversation is important because, we look at how we can help use AI in a way in which it, builds trust rather than, leading to the erosion of trust. You gave several good examples. I won't reiterate that. I'll talk about, Syngenta is an agriculture company. So we help farmers produce the food that we eat. On that chart, the closest to agriculture was beer right at the end of it. But today, when we look at AI, we are seeing an opportunity that AI can help solve problems that were not solvable before or much harder to solve. Using data about weather, using data about your soil, using data about the climate change and so on to help farmers. I think to me that is really the trust builder, that we are using AI in a way in which it makes real impact, and not simply as a way to get things done easily and flood the market with more AI generated slop.
Are there any sort of successes or like in terms of Syngenta's application of 100%. AI coming out at the moment?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, imagine farmers, right? So if you typically take a small farmer in countries like India, Vietnam, or Indonesia, the typical persona you can imagine is an aging farmer who's probably not very savvy, not very well educated. Compare that to a farmer in, say, Brazil or US, it's very sophisticated, large farms, access to technology and everything. These don't compare with each other. There's a digital divide, as we call it. And one of the things which we did was we built an AI agronomist, launched it in India, already being used by more than 1 million farmers. And this is, AI is able to answer expertise level questions in their native languages, in their local languages. So farmer in India can ask a question in Marathi or Punjabi, right, and get an answer that what is happening on my field. I take a picture of what they see on the field, and the system can tell them that this is the problem and what you should do about it. So that's been, a great success story in terms of AI applied in the hands.
The real impact.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Feroz, Jayesh?
Yeah, so I think I'll just add to whatever Sam and Feroz said. The way I look at it is, it's in a way amplifying whatever the underlying brand represents. If the underlying brand is respecting data, respecting privacy, respecting, surveillance that you do in a way, AI is going to amplify the brand trust. And if you are going to be using data in a wrong manner, disregarding the privacy, disregarding or unauthorized surveillances, AI is going to destroy trust significantly. And that's what we've seen enough number of examples of that. The way I look at it is, it's the way the trust is being seen is changing. Traditionally, the trust was built by humans, by human action, step by step, action by action. Today, I think there is a layer above that, which is how did you build systems? How is values embedded in the system? How is it governance, right? And all of that is going to define how consumers or regulators look at us from a trust perspective, right? Look at the way AI is amplifying things. We are working with some of our clients where we have helped them, personalize responses to the consumers in terms of questions at a scale. And that kind of builds a significant trust because there is transparency, there is, emotions, human emotions are taken out, human biases are taken out. And that kind of builds, a trust. So all of that, I think, puts together.
And well, you talk about kind of built by humans. When when AI can generate people, voices, images, stories that feel real, how should brands kind of think about authenticity? I think because we've talked in the branding world for years about the need for brands to be human, real, authentic. But is that kind of possible or even necessary now in an AI kind of world?
Great question. I think traditionally being real or being authentic was real images, real people, unbiased image, unbiased stories in a way, real stories, and unfiltered, images in a way. Today, if you look at it in an AI world, it's humanly impossible to find out what is AI generated and what is human generated, right? And in that kind of an era, if you're trying to say that being real is not using AI, that battle is already lost in my mind, right? The definition of authenticity is changing. It's moving from content to intent. It's moving from what is the campaign doing to what is the consistent behavior of the brand. What does the brand sound like to versus what it delivers in terms of, you talked about it earlier, in terms of product services consistently. And that is the chain that we are dealing with, right? AI can build superlative narrative, right, or great narratives. But without true governance, the trust is not going to be built. So, you'll have great narrative, which is an advantage if you use AI. But unless and until that narrative relates to the brand, that's a human job at the end of the day. The trust is not going to be built.
Do you have anything to build on that?
No, I thought the framework that you were sharing about, looking at different dimensions of trust and, even the temporal aspects behind it was a very good way to think about, how to apply AI in a way that it reinforces those dimensions of trust.
Great. And so, thinking about the role of AI in marketing, Sam, as CMO of KPMG, so we've got, AI offers potential for, huge efficiency, personalization in marketing, but it also brings risks if it's not kind of managed effectively. How are you, in terms of KPMG's marketing function, how are you kind of adopting AI? Where are you seeing the gains? Where is it not working for you so much at the moment?
So about 2 years ago, we set up an AI working group. So, I should explain our business model as a sort of federated state of member firms. And I'm sort of obviously the global CMO. I work with all the CMOs around the world. And so we set this up because we were in definite AI roulette mode. Everyone was trying lots of different things. I remember there was one pivotal moment in a meeting where I think Forrester put up what the top AI tools were for different parts of the marketing mix. And I think we had one snap, which I won't say who it was, but one that's being implemented in Germany. Apart from that, we managed to come up with another 30 tools that weren't even on the list. So we've had 2 years of that. I think fast forward 2 years, we've now got to the point where there's like sort of pretty much 3 tools that we are now going to purchase on a global basis, and we're working through that with global procurement, which is not always at AI speed, as we work through that. But the other thing that was really interesting from that 2 years to now is some of the core large language model tools like Copilot or Gemini, etc. The capability and functionality in those tools now has enhanced so much, just even in that 2-year period. So we find some of the things that we thought we were going to go after, we no longer need. So that's probably, I would say, a learning that we've had from that. So in terms of how are we using it, so when I go back to the working group, we looked at every process and said, where could it play a role? So we're using it for research and analysis. We're using it, obviously, for creative. We use it for, I would say, content development of assets versus necessarily content development, which I'll maybe circle back on. And we're using it in planning. It's great for us for things like translation, particularly producing big global campaigns that we want to get out. And we try to give all our member firms a sort of 3-week lead way for them to implement campaigns from us from globally. So, and I'll probably say there's 2 principles that we have, and we're always transparent about our usage. And we do not use it to develop thought leadership. So we're very clear those are the 2 markers that we have. From a creative perspective, so when we did the You Can With AI campaign, the video, you can still see that now if you want. So we always got something right because it won an award recently for best use of AI. It looks really dated. If you look at it now, it's like a year or so. So we're now in the next stage of producing the next wave, and we've got one coming out on agentic orchestration at the end of the month. And actually, this is interesting. So yes, we're using AI, but we have also brought humans back into that, and we're using the human movement because we want to get that reality and authenticity check into what we're doing. So that's interesting. We've done a lot by the way of animation. So if you make it to the Belvedere this week, you'll see on the screens there or branding outside. We've done a lot with that now. And then this is back to disappointments, I would say. We're looking potentially to build ourselves because it doesn't exist, but what I would almost call a personalizer tool. So how easy is it just to change characters, locations, background settings? So when we deliver sort of, real client stories, how is it easy for member firms to adapt that quickly? So for us, in some ways, it's been a good leveler. We never had like massive budgets to go out and film, expensive videos. Now we can do things that we couldn't do before, which is great. But we've got those, guardrails in place around what we do with it. And this was something I learned. I was at an event recently, FT, and someone senior from the FT editorial team said that they had a principle, which I'm going to share with everybody because it's a good one to steal with pride, which is start with why, not AI. And I think that's really important from a marketing perspective if we look at usage and what we're going to do. So just a bit of advice for everyone there.
That's interesting. You touched upon, the budgets and the content creation. I remember a conversation with my chief head of marketing. And we were talking about the same scenario that, you could do one photo shoot and then change the background, change the language, and apply that across, different countries. And I asked her a question, to which I would say we haven't still answered it, is to that actor and the crew, do you pay them for one shoot or 30 different shoots or somewhere in between, right? That's the kind of question that, you touched upon governance earlier, that we need to be thinking about. That what does it mean to really apply AI in the right way?
I mean, when we were talking before the session, you mentioned about customer success stories in terms of marketing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good example because, when it comes to agriculture, every country, every local region is different. And when we then apply AI, we make sure that it is deployed in that local context. So we develop it globally, but then we fine-tune it with the data and the context of that local environment, which is why this question of, do you charge for one shoot or 5 shoots becomes important. But we've seen tremendous impact. Farmers in Tanzania can improve their rice yield by an order of magnitude by doing effective AI-assisted decisions. And these kind of impact is important. I'll maybe talk about it later.
Yeah.
Why in agriculture this is fundamental.
Well, Jayesh,
Yeah.
did you?
No,
Go, Sam.
just triggered. I was just going to, because you were talking almost sometimes about the indirect impact. And one thing I didn't say, there's a lot of indirect impact about the way marketing now works. So, we're what I would call a content-led brand in terms of we produce a lot of thought leadership content to go out. The way that we are approaching that now and what I would call almost the sort of digital PR implications is way different. So, the shift from SEO to GEO and generative engine optimization, is your content now being discovered in the right places? That's a big shift for us because we weren't necessarily in the right places. If you think about Reddit, Wikipedia, those are the places now that the large language models are drawing on to make sure that your content is discoverable when people no longer click and they just go straight to the answer. So there's all of those implications, even if it's not about direct application within your marketing, that you need to sort of think through the implications of what you need to do differently.
Did you want to come in on anything on that?
I think we covered most of it.
And then cross-function, we've got the C-suite represented here on the panel. Just in terms of cross-functional collaboration and the importance of that, are you seeing kind of AI reinforcing functional silos? So kind of AI for HR, AI for finance, and almost so creating departmental intelligence, as it were, or is it helping to break down silos, kind of creating aggregated business intelligence? And what does effective kind of cross-functional collaboration look like when it comes to AI?
For us, inside of Syngenta, so Syngenta is about 60,000 people, close to $30 billion in top line. We took a very conscious decision that it's not about silos. It has to work end to end. Even if you think about it in the context of a silo, if I change how our supply chain function works, for it to truly change, the processes and workflows have to change, the technology has to change, the people and their skill set and roles have to change, locations have to change, and so on. So any little change, even in the silo, has a ripple effect that works across the organization. So if we continue to think about it in silos, it won't work. So what we've done internally is we have this program internally called the Lighthouses. So we took a small number of very high impact areas of transformation. And we said this is not about technology. So it's not about technology deployed on top of our existing workflows. It's about using technology to really rewire the business. And that cuts across. So that has to be end to end. Early days, maybe next year when I come, I'll have some data on what kind of impact we have seen. But it's already looking very, very promising in terms of what it can have an impact.
Yeah, I think Feroz kind of talked about it. If you are looking at the large-scale AI impact, right, it has to get embedded into the core part of the business, the core operations of the business. And if you're looking at something like that, you cannot have AI in silos, right? You need to have the whole of IT infrastructure data set in a way prepared for it. You need to have the fundamentals right in terms of whether you have systems in place, whether you have people who are AI enabled, etc. And for that, the whole organization has to come together. And even when the whole organization comes together, like every cross-functional initiative, people will have to rise above their own functions and see what is important from the organization perspective. If I'm only going to look at from a finance perspective and from the margin perspective, it's not going to maybe yield results. I'll have to balance, what is the trust factor, how the consumers are going to look at it, how margins are going to impact it, of course, and how the risk and trust over a period of time going to evolve. And maybe there is a fine balance between all of them. You compromise somewhere, you don't compromise somewhere in terms of what is important for you. But overall, I think that's how I would look at it. It's like any other large-scale cross-functional initiative where you have to ensure that everybody comes together, and maybe there is somebody who plays a role of a navigator on top of that, of bringing everybody together and moving them in the right direction. I think that's how we've seen it working across.
Infosys' brand being about navigation, of course. And well, I was talking about business value creation earlier in the context of brands driving business value. Infosys is kind of at the forefront of helping clients implement AI. So just in terms of your clients, asking questions around, there's probably so many different areas that they could go, and the question is where and how to focus that AI adoption in terms of enhancing business value. So where are you seeing kind of the biggest opportunity to create business value from AI, and what kind of watch outs in terms of that?
Sure. So I think, we are seeing slowly the shift from, pure insights to enabling decisions, to where AI is now becoming mainstream and making real decisions, right? Whether it is decisions in terms of pricing, whether it is decision in terms of inventory management, supply chain, working capital management, capital allocation, and so on and so forth. And eventually we see that as becoming all pervasive in a way, right? And I think this is a year where many of the organizations will make that shift, right? From standalone, siloed, POCs to other use cases to the actual, org-wide use cases. And that's a change that we are seeing happening. I think the opportunities, if you ask me, are in the decision advantage where, where you can, again, as I talked about, pricing, inventory management, working capital, large-scale productivity. And I'm not talking about organic efficiency here. I'm talking about productivity in terms of, knowledge worker space, whether it is finance, whether it is, engineering, sales, etc. And then deep consumer relevance to your end state customers. How do you get them personalized responses to not only what it is, but why it is, right? At scale, at speed, that is unprecedented. And I think that is what we are seeing, and many more, but these are the large opportunities that we are seeing up. In terms of pitfall, I think the biggest to watch out for is whether it is technology versus economy, right? Very often we go after technology, but don't really see whether it really gives you economic value, right? And that is the biggest challenge in my mind, right? Because then it becomes a toy. It's not going to create a value for you. So, stay away from that. Whether you are undermining the need for data or the fundamentals, the data, people, processes, workforce, etc., and the change management that comes with this, or the biases that comes because of the AI, because it's the early stages still, right? Biases, hallucination, etc. I think that is what we look out for. But I think eventually it's not going to be an organization that has maximum number of AI use cases. I think it's going to be the organization that will have AI deeply embedded into the core of it, into the operations of it, that will come out as winners in my mind.
Are you seeing any particular areas within Syngenta for that, where the value is being created most at the moment?
To build on your point about the core of the enterprise. So if I can get a little technical, we are modernizing the enterprise right from its core. So, starting with SAP all the way up to systems that are facing the farmers, who are the end customers. We're really overhauling the entire technical architecture underneath, with modernizing our ERP infrastructure. We, in partnership with Infosys, we just finished a big rollout to change over to the new ERP. And then cutting across, right? So if I take the example of, imagine the picture of the Last Supper with Jesus, right? Big canvas. And to talk about the question of silos and how they need to work. So I told my team that I don't want us to be building silos. You can imagine there are windows, and you can be looking through the window to any part of that picture, but you're still looking at the same picture. You're not looking at a part of the picture. Because if we ended up creating different pictures, then I need 5 Pablo Picassos and Michelangelos to create that picture of the enterprise, which we can't afford. What this means at a technical level is things like agent-to-agent communication, model, MCP protocols are fundamentally important, so that an agent that is being used by HR is able to give me an answer of a supply chain by, using agent-to-agent communication with the supply chain agent. And these are really starting to show impact, that we are able to then build a consistent picture and answers that, people can get, and then using that to then rewire our workflows and processes. And this is not limited only to within the enterprise. This is also then applied to in the hands of the farmers. So our sales reps have access to information with which they can be the best advisors to the farmers, giving them recommendation on what they should be doing on their field.
I think I'll open it up to the floor if there are any questions.
So, hi, thank you so much, Natalia Fila. Thank you. Is this working? Yeah. So I find that we are talking a lot about the implementation of technology and how it's building and how we're forecasting it, looking. But one thing I think there might be a need for a shift is looking at the people, because obviously this is affecting us, employees. And they say, obviously the data varies, top of my mind, but that if we train for 8 hours a week employees on AI, we will save 14 hours of work a week. However, there's about 12% of training to those people. So my question would be, where do you think in terms of leadership and mindset and roles, do leaders need to be placed now? Do they need to be shifting that mindset, and how, in order to enable all of this technology to be happening? Thank you.
I don't mind kicking off. So, I mean, I would just say, yes, we recognise that, trust drives adoption. So I think that's why we've talked quite a lot about the systems and getting the systems trusted, because that will drive up. I mean, from a KPMG perspective, we have 275,000 employees. We have trained, I would say, 85% of those on AI. In terms of what we talk about, we've done things like 24 hours of AI, where we run it around the world at the same time. And then as we've moved on, we've gone into more specific training for people. So, and we sort of look on it and say, it is about augmenting what people do day to day so that they are then free to add more value in the other things that they're doing. But I think to get to the nub of your question, yes, that comes from leadership, and it's a leadership choice about how to position and role model what needs to happen on AI. So we do a lot around adoption and getting people comfortable with it, because then that's the way in future we'll see the value. And I think, like both of the companies up here, we see this is a full transformation of our business. And the bit we've talked a lot about the what I would call the enable and the embedding phase of AI, but there will be the evolve phase where people will fundamentally change their business models, and that's what's going to be coming next. And
if I can just add, I think similar story at Infosys. We are 350,000 employees, right? And we have seen technology waves after waves, and every time we have seen a wave, we have repurposed our workforce to learn on that wave, and that's not different this time either, right? Out of those 350,000 employees, 95% or 90+% are completely trained on AI at different levels, from being AI aware to being AI builder or AI masters, depending on the need. And that piece of being AI builder or master is expanding as we speak. So that's how we are seeing change. The point that comes from a leadership perspective is, at every point in time, are you pushing your team to embrace technology, faster than ever? And I think that's the change that we are seeing today. In my own function, I can say that with confidence today that we have been telling people that show me what AI can do, and I can give you an example, and also how value is being misinterpreted or less interpreted, whichever way you look at it. There's an order to collection process that we had, and we said we should embed AI into this. We embedded 14 agents into that. We reduced the cycle by a few days, got us $50 million on a constant basis in terms of cash flow. Now the product team said we have saved 30% of effort of a small AR team, that is collection team. The AR team said we've generated $5 million in cash. If you put it in bank, it'll get you $50 million in cash. You put it in bank, you'll earn $5 million. The corporate finance team comes and says, $50 million in a constant basis, cash collection, multiply that by a P, you have generated $1.5 billion of market cap. And that's the delta of how the value is being perceived. So unless the leader is pushing for that kind of a value generation, you won't see the team embracing it as well.
Yeah. Maybe if I just build on it, what we've found is to explain the why behind it. And when the why is clear, the adoption is a lot more seamless and intuitive. You know, if the why, the reason behind doing AI is seen as cost cutting, or I can service customers without having people on the ground and so on, then it won't work. I mean, people will reject it, customers will reject it. What we look at is the why in agriculture is basically a big problem that we as a society are heading towards. By 2050, we will have 10 billion people. There is not enough land to feed everybody. We need 600 million hectares of additional land just to grow enough food for everyone. And that is the why for us as a company. That if we don't do it, if we don't do this to ourselves, and if we don't bring these kind of transformative protocols to agriculture, we as a society will not have enough food to feed everyone. So that's a lot then becomes more intuitive for people to fall behind that, yes, I know why I'm doing this.
Thought-provoking. Any other questions from the audience? Okay. Just a last closing question then for everyone, I think. Looking ahead, what do you think is the next kind of major frontier for brands and their use of AI, and how should leaders in those organizations be preparing for that?
Start
Over
with
you,
me.
Sam.
Okay, so I'm not going to necessarily talk tech, although those who were at CES 2 weeks ago have all come back saying it's physical AI, it's physical AI. So that's what we're hearing. But we've got a session in that ice rink 11:45 today. If anyone wants to come and see me. It's with Microsoft, MasterCard, and Cloudflare. It's really looking at agent commerce and how that's going to impact going forward. And I think that and the future of the agentic web and how that's going to evolve, I think is going to be really interesting. But I would bring it back to, we haven't talked about this much up here, but AI is a massive leveler. People who can enter your market that weren't entering your market before, the things that they can do now, which they were maybe not able to do before. If you are not thinking about how are you going to keep or retain your competitive advantage and stay distinctive and keep original in this market, that is the thing to focus on. So I think I would bring it back to that, and I would also say, the future currency is trust. So it's exactly the point you made earlier. It will be about whether you are trusted as a brand and how you can go about keeping your customers or clients loyal to that as you move forward. That, for me, is where the focus needs to be.
Yeah. For me, I'll go back to what you said at the start, the value, the impact that we create. And I think what companies and brands need to focus on is that impact that they will have. And I'll also say selfishly that I don't see enough of when it comes to agriculture and food security. Out of the top 10 you said, 8 of them were technology companies. So there is influence coming from the technology companies, but the impact has to come when we apply technology in meaningful ways. So I hope that we are able to see that shift in discourse and create maybe next year or a few years from now, people will talk about industry brands that have real impact, enabled through technology, but bridging that gap.
Thank you.
I think for me, as I said, slightly earlier, it is about, how do you get what AI does and relate that to what brand means, right? Or what the organization means. AI will disproportionately, in an unprecedented manner, increase scale, increase speed, for whatever you're doing. If that is not going to relate to what the brand means in terms of people's mind, in terms of how the brand behaves, whether it is product, services, decision that the brand is taking, you're going to have the challenge, right? And that is where I go back to my earlier statement that, the way people are going to see trust is not only the traditional way, but in an additional layer of how systems are built, what kind of values are embedded, what kind of guardrails are being built in terms of what decisions AI can take, what decisions human will have to be involved into. And all of that put together will mean you created enormous amount of trust. You build it carefully, you will create enormous amount of value and trust. You build it carelessly, you might erode it faster than you even realize, because in the social world today, socially connected world today, any failure, it happens in public in real time. right? And that's the difference AI brings in.
Yeah.
I suppose there's a lot of talk about AI and the disruption, but it is fundamentally a tool. I still believe that the fundamentals of building a strong brand still haven't changed. You've got to be relevant, got to be differentiated.
Yeah.
You've got to have clear values. You've got to have a clear positioning in the market. Nothing's really changed in terms of the fundamentals of building a strong brand. AI is another tool that allows you to deliver that if it's done well in the right hands. Absolutely. Kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed to our panelists. This sort of wraps up the end of the presentation and panel session. If you can, please do stick around for some networking afterwards. But otherwise, thank you very much to the panelists, and thank you to you guys for coming.
Thank you.